Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of She Plays Games. I hope you all are doing well and are finding ways to keep busy. It's been so inspiring to see how people are continuing to embrace the challenges they're facing, but it's been equally important to see people pushing out messages to say that it's okay if you're struggling with mental health right now. I know throughout this experience, I've had some really low days, but connecting with everyone helps bring me back to reality. And on that note, I'm really excited to share with you today's episode as I got to speak with Anna Hollinrake, who's a principal artist at Media Tonic. After being inspired to draw by Manga, Anna took her passion and crafted something unique. It was fascinating to talk about how she developed her style and what she's learned from working on numerous video games in numerous roles. I really hope you enjoy Anna's story, and if you like what I do, please be sure to subscribe to my podcast on your chosen platform. This is episode 20 of She Plays Games. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to be here.
It's nice to actually also connect because it feels like ages ago since we last saw each other.
Yeah, when was that? Was that it was Limit Break, wasn't it? At the Limit Break Christmas event, maybe?
It was. And that was so much fun. It was such a nice evening with Anissa, which has actually just closed now, I think, the applications.
Yes, it's really exciting. I can't wait to get involved again. So I'm really looking forward to this year's mentorship scheme. So.
What was it like last year?
It was really good. It was lovely. It's funny because you end up just being in this space, just hearing all of these amazing stories of people getting these jobs and all these wonderful opportunities, and then just being able to talk directly to people and discuss the anxieties as well of being creative, of sometimes feeling like you're not being listened to, even for myself, being able to speak to others about things I was worried about. It was incredibly rewarding. It was really, really rewarding. And I think it went a lot deeper. I think because the program itself allowed for that, it went a lot deeper than just art making or craft. I think it allowed for speaking on worries and that kind of thing. So yeah, really valuable time.
I guess that's the thing. That's sort of the thing that you can't really get from just sort of researching online on YouTube, for just yourself, isn't it? Or even in courses, they won't cover the stresses and the emotional side that comes with being in this industry and what you have to do in order to create, do they?
No, absolutely. I mean, you have aspects of things that touch on those worries, but it's very different to be able to directly communicate with someone, especially if it's someone that you look up to or you feel a connection with. Having that opportunity to see someone that's in a place that you find incredibly aspirational and be able to ask them sometimes quite personal questions about things that they struggle with, and then see how you also have that. It humanizes, I suppose, some roles, especially in games that can feel unattainable as well. When you see some women who are just phenomenal and at levels that you could only dream of, and I think you have a tendency, at least I do, there's a tendency to almost deify them as beyond having struggles. And it's so valuable to be able to sit down and talk to people just as people, as humans that are going through difficulties and how they can work through them.
Absolutely. And I mean, to further that, I'm in awe of your talent. You're such a talented artist, and I think your work does have so much depth and meaning. And I know that you've had a strong focus on art for the last 10 years or so. As I presume you did it as a GCSE before then, taking it as an A level. But when did you feel you started to develop your own personal aesthetic or style?
Oh, it's kind of funny. It took a very, very long time. I didn't really find what I would describe as my style until 2015, so about 5 years ago now. There were hints of it, maybe a year or two earlier, but I was very, very set for a long time on doing more traditional Magic the Gathering style illustration. I tried pretty much any style that there was, and it was really, really useful. Now that I'm currently working full time doing concept art, I'm having to draw all sorts of different things, and having had that experience of experimenting, I'm well prepared to be able to jump from a bunch of different aesthetics. But in terms of my own work, and I suppose the kind of things that I tend to get sought out for and hired for, it was definitely a process of experimentation. I'm a firm believer in the phrase, a no is still an answer, because if you try something and it doesn't work for you, at least you can discount that. You can put that to one side. And I think that's what I had to do. Just sift through everything until I found the things that resonated with me.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really fair point, is that, yeah, like trying everything, the being a more well-rounded person, more well-rounded artist, it is just something that you can bring to everything. Like we've talked before about like transferable skills, and I imagine that still is within art or artistry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm able to, because yes, I did study art at GCSE A level. I did a foundation art course, which was a bad time. And then I did.
Just ignore that time. Ignore that.
Yeah, that was a year that we just gently cross off the calendar. And then I did game art at university. But through that, particularly game art, I had to learn how to 3D model and work in engine. And even though I don't necessarily do that anymore, while I did do them professionally for a while, I don't do anymore. I'm able to take that logic and apply that to my concepts and see where things would fall down in terms of practical application in games, for example. And then even when it comes to 2D art, I spent about a year and a half working in TV animation. So I was art directing the CBeebies animated show. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so cute.
Oh, yeah, no. It's still kind of mad. Like, I go on BBC iPlayer and I'm just like, oh, there's a snowman that I made. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, so jumping into animation and the animation industry, obviously there was a big change in some of the language that we used, but in terms of drawing skills, it's design language, artistic fundamentals, they're all very transferable.
So you've said before as well that you have a really strong sort of connection with manga, and like that's something that you sort of started with. Was there any particular manga that was like a source of your inspiration? Like which one was like, I need to draw like this?
Oh, I was obsessed with Dot Hack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a super widespread one, but I would just consume it. I remember I would go to Waterstones and it had like this very small manga section, and Dot Hack was one of the few that could reliably be there. There were only, I think, 3 volumes of it. I think that also helped because I didn't have very much money. And,
and they're really expensive, surprisingly.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was like £8, and I was just like, I'm 14. I don't have £8 right now.
I know. Not for a book.
Not for a book that I could read in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I bought those 3 over time, and I would just read them over and over and just copy pictures from them and practice hands. You can still see the way that I draw hands sometimes reflected in that, when you've got those kind of dainty like floaty hands that have like the two kind of central fingers together and the other two kind of floating out, and then you have a little gap in between them. It's a very dot hack influence style, so that was a huge one for me. I guess I drew a bit of Fruits Basket as well. I mean, like I also drew a ton of Pokemon kind of stuff, but I think the one that was most fundamental was probably dot hack for me.
It is so cool though. Like I love manga. Like I love a lot of the different art styles that are present in manga, and in some cases I think it's just so complex. Like there's so many manga series. Like I remember me and my best friend in high school, Lauren, she introduced me to Chrono Crusade. Have you ever read that one?
No, I haven't. No.
The scenery in that is just gorgeous. Like they really do a lot of landscaping stuff that you just don't really consider seeing in like just a normal kid's illustration book. Like you just sort of it's so intensely complex, and like the talent that goes into manga is just so intense. But like I feel like in schools still, at least when I was in school, the teachers were still really against drawing in that way. Do you still find that?
I mean, I definitely had that. I drew tons and tons of manga, and I think I gave like a presentation in was it citizenship? I gave a presentation in citizenship on manga and anime because I was a big weeb.
I am too. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine. You're in good company.
Yeah. But it's really funny because there's this definite kind of push against it, and I can see why in some ways when you're focusing on artistic fundamentals. Like there's that whole battle of it's my style versus I don't want to draw, like learn how to draw like the articulation of arms, for example. But I think yes, it absolutely does get discounted a lot of the time, and it's fun now seeing all of these artists who were so overwhelmingly influenced by manga and anime when they were growing up, getting into the industry or getting into positions of power and decision making in the industry, and seeing that being remixed, because it's brilliant. It's great fun. You just Twitter and Instagram are awash with people remixing old school manga and that kind of thing, which is really I love it. I absolutely love it.
Just eat it all up.
Yeah, 100%.
I have to admit, I'm always a fan of, like, I know it's probably deemed quite basic, but if I see a Sailor Moon thing, I'm like, I'm there. I'm there.
Yeah. It's really funny because I never actually watched Sailor Moon, but I adore everything around it. So yeah, I get that same sense of joy and nostalgia from seeing that kind of thing, even though I haven't actually consumed the media. There was a set of Sailor Moon keycaps that went up a little while ago, and people started getting their deliveries of them, and I'm a bit of a dork for like mechanical keyboards and stuff.
They're so
like
pretty.
I've got a mechanical keyboard with like pretty pastel keys all over it, and now I'm very much like, oh, I wish I'd spent the £200 on that Sailor Moon keycap set.
I know, because the colors are so the colors that they use for anything Sailor Moon is just always so pretty.
There's
so cute.
There's this really strong revival of like 80s and 90s manga styles and color palettes. You can see it in a lot of vaporwave and a lot of fashion. I'm all for it. It's 100% my jam.
Yeah. And I mean, we sort of touched on it a bit already, but like you feel as though it is still beneficial for developing to learn about like Monet and Picasso and Van Gogh and those type of styles. Do you think that they're still extremely important for budding artists to explore?
So yeah, something that I think is really important is both learning the fundamentals but also humanizing the artist. I think that a lot of education sets students up for failure if they, one, don't teach people how art can be constructed in practical ways, I suppose, that set you up with tools for success in terms of achieving a successful image. And two, they put the successful masterworks on a pedestal that doesn't really show you how the artist got there. It makes the art much more separate from, you can't see the pathway to get there, essentially. I'm reading a book at the moment that I'd really recommend called Art and Fear. It's observations on the perils and rewards of art making. It's by David Bales and Ted Orland. But they cover this a lot in how you can end up feeling like the artists that create these phenomenal pieces never went through any struggles and feel very almost like godlike and distant from you because you don't see the process. And I think by having a dual-pronged approach of having that process in artistic fundamentals as well as analyzing these pieces in terms of how they achieved that, even just technically rather than just from the theory point of view, it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm gonna have to look up that book, definitely.
It's really, really good. I'd recommend it. It's one of those books that you kind of know everything that's already in it, like, but you don't believe it. Like it keeps saying that you will go through struggles and that's okay. Like, just because you're having a bad art day doesn't mean that you're a failed artist. And you're just there like, I see what you're saying, but also,
yeah.
So it's one of those books that it's pretty short, but it's something that I think a lot of people would probably come back to once every few years as a little refresher.
Yeah, just to sort of check in with yourself. It's almost like meditation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a reminder of maybe I'd say it's quite soul cleansing. Yeah, because I think we internalize all these beliefs as artists that we have to be constantly productive and we need to pay attention to what other people think. And it very much advocates for being realistic with yourself and listening to your artistic truth, I suppose. So yeah.
No, that's really cool. So changing gears a bit but sticking in with books, you mentioned that you like collect art books. So I was wondering, what are some of your favorite like video game related art books, and which games have really impressed you as far as their art style goes?
So I mean, in terms of art books, I have two that I really treasure. And one of them's for games. One of them, someone I know found it in a charity shop and kind of kept it under their bed for a year before giving it to me as a birthday present. It's the art book for Guild Wars 2.
Okay.
And Guild Wars 2 in particular is kind of one of those moments that I think, at least when I was coming up in the industry, it felt like that was one of the places to be that was very much like a maker of amazing artists. So you flick through it and there's just this phenomenal like piece after piece after piece. And ArenaNet was kind of known for holding up their artists as kind of rock stars and celebrating them. And there's just this amazing cluster of artists that are putting out like top of their game work. It's phenomenal. And it's impossible to get hold of now. So I really cherish that one.
Somebody who had it in a charity shop, like that's amazing. Yeah. That is a find.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose the other one kind of has a similar vibe, I guess. It's Kazuo Oga exhibition. So I hope that I'm pronouncing that right, but Kazuo Oga, he's the background artist for most of the kind of iconic, most if not all iconic Studio Ghibli films.
Yes.
And I was on this trip in Japan, and I think we were in Osaka, and I found this singular copy of it in the Studio Ghibli section of this 4th-floor anime and manga superstore.
Amazing.
There was only one. It cost, I think, about $30 equivalent.
That's not too bad.
But no, but I mean, if you want to get it like in the UK or something, you have to part with, I think, about £170.
Jesus.
So, yeah.
Oh, yay, import.
Yeah. But it was like shrink wrap. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a chance on this. I don't know if this is what I think it is, what I think it is.
Yeah.
So I remember being stood in the street with my friends and unwrapping it, and just, it's this huge book with like fold out pages. And there's this one bit where it unfolds to reveal the night scene. Just this beautiful panorama from My Neighbor Totoro. And I got really quite emotional. Because just Studio Ghibli, I mean, I'm looking at my Cintiq right now and it's propped up on 3 different Studio Ghibli art books. But that was a fundamental catalyst to me finding my art style.
It is incredible.
So, yeah, I adore them. So that was those 2 are probably my most cherished ones.
So how did you feel when Ni no Kuni came out?
I poured, I think, about 40 hours into it before I had even unlocked. I think it was basically the crafting section. I absolutely adored Ding Dong Dell. The hand painted environments were really inspiring touchstone when I was still doing 3D art. I got a little bit cross because it was kind of painted like it was some kind of Pokemon thing, and you could catch the I can't remember what the demons, Pokemon creatures, spirits, I'm not sure. But you could catch the creatures, but I just couldn't get it to work. I think I killed about 200 of those cacti creatures before it would let me, and I think it ruined itself for me at that point, which is a real shame because it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
I know. When I heard that it was going to be made into a game and that it was going to stay like this art style, I just my goodness.
Beautiful game. Little bit too grindy for my taste.
But then that's unfortunate. Like, see, I love, like, I'm all for like JRPGs. I mean, I help run Final Fantasy Union, so like, but I hate grinding. Like, I'm just such the biggest like anti-pro JRPG person. But like grinding drives me absolutely mad. Just give me the story.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely it. Like I'm not a huge fan of games that don't respect your time anymore, I suppose. I think it's something that becomes more and more pronounced as you get more responsibilities as time goes on.
Unfortunately.
But now I'm just a huge fan of a game that I can just eat up in an afternoon. Like, love it.
It's like a good book, you know? It's like a short, sweet little novel that you can just gulp down. All right, that's fine.
Or even, I mean, I got quite frustrated Control because I'm in love with it. I absolutely adore it. But some of the fights were kind of excessively hard without being entirely fair, and it ended up eating a lot more of my time than I would have liked. But then the experience and the world that it was in was phenomenal, so I didn't I kept going. But I really appreciate shorter experiences just because I guess I find them to be a little bit tighter and interestingly crafted, I suppose.
No, I totally get you, and I think that's a thing for like indie games at the moment, like how great the indie scene is, because so many of the games are really beautifully crafted and really beautifully illustrated, but it's just like they're like short and clean. Like it's just not that massive amount of filler. It's almost like a filler.
No, absolutely.
You don't need all that.
I just saw before we started recording that Telling Lies has just come out on Switch. And as a huge fan of her story, and like safe in the knowledge that loads of people I respect absolutely adore telling lies, I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy that. And I don't think that's going to be a super long experience either. Similarly, you mentioned beautiful illustration. I played Tangle Tower over Christmas, and oh my god, it's stunning. Like, the animation had a breakdown on Twitter recently, and the magic that went into that in terms of the code and the tools and the thought process was phenomenal. And as a tight experience with narrative and brilliant voice acting, it's hilarious. It's so good. I'd absolutely recommend it if you want like a tasty little game to eat up in like an evening or two.
Oh, it looks really cool, actually. Like, I love I don't want to like compare it to it, but it just reminds me of just like the old fashioned Cartoon Network type of shows. Like, it's just,
yeah, I can see that.
But it's like updated, and it looks so cute.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I absolutely adore the artwork. I'm biased because I think Adam Vian and Catherine Unger did the art, and then Tom Vian coded it, I think.
Oh, cool.
They're all amazing. They're all brilliant. So
that's also awesome when you have that connection, though, that you know somebody who's worked on it, and you know that they put their soul into it. It's just, so
absolutely. Good. They've done a stellar job. So yeah.
And I think we touched on this before, how as an artist you really have to sort of change gears to appease your client. Like, you can't, you do have to like change your style in order to adapt for whoever you're servicing, whatever the end product is. So you've never really confined yourself to one particular subset of art. You've done traditional concept art. You've created 3D environmental assets and also 3D props using like Photoshop, Maya, and engines like Unity. Do you feel as though broadening your scope has helped you become more well-rounded?
Yeah, I definitely would say so. I'm absolutely the kind of person that likes too many things and can get a little bit, I guess, I fall into the trap of doing too many projects and then wandering off and seeing something else and being like, oh, let's try that. But although that can be a bit perilous in the short term, it's really good for having a kind of broad spectrum of interests that you can pick up and apply to practical things later on. And I think it really depends. Like, from a from a work standpoint, it's led to me having more, is curative a term? I'm able to I focus more on curation rather than being hyper specific on one thing, which I really like because it lends to my kind of personality, I suppose, where I like a lot of stuff. And I suppose through that, I've been able to do art direction and focus on the broad picture of things, just because I have that experience in a whole bunch of different things.
It's almost like the curiosity. Like, they always say that about life, like always be curious. And
I'm a firm believer in yes to things that scare you. And I mean, sometimes it doesn't pay off as well as you'd like, but you always learn something from it, so it's not that bad. But additionally, sometimes you'll say yes to things that scare you, and it'll be phenomenal, and it'll lead to things that you couldn't ever anticipate. I'm reminded of I became Twitter mutuals with someone, and we chatted a bit on Twitch, and she invited me to share her table at a small convention, a comic convention in Bournemouth. I'd never tabled at anything before, but I'd always been curious, but I'd never really had the know-how to find a table and all that kind of thing. It's kind of it's very clandestine. It's difficult to find out where those opportunities are when you're not in it.
Mm.
So I was kind of like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but go on then. So I said yes to it. And I've done comic conventions all over the country now. I've done quite a few London ones, MCM London, which I think is the biggest or one of the biggest in the country, and I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. But I think as a person, I'm definitely someone that jumps in both feet and into a whole bunch of different scenarios, but it can only lend itself to learning more, both about my craft and also about myself and what I like.
Yeah, it's the risk taking, isn't it? It's just, you need to, if you want to make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs, and those few eggs may be the things that scare you, you know? It's just what you got to do. But no, that's really cool. And I mean, with that, you've worked on quite a few VR projects. Even though it's been around for a while now, VR still feels like it's kind of like this new thing. I mean, honestly, like I can count on one hand how many times I've actually tried out VR. Like it's still like this new shiny toy to me. I mean, there's probably limited guidance out there as to how to make a sort of stylized game for VR. How did you approach being an artist on that type of project?
So there's a lot of technical things to consider. The camera angle is a huge one because nausea is a real big issue. When we were working on Lola and the Giant, that was something that we really wanted to get right. Also,
you said about the cave. You said about the cave specifically, I remember.
Yeah. You wouldn't think that making the character run under a beam or something would be quite as heartache inducing, but there's definitely a lot to consider with that, because you don't want to literally blindside the player with an asset that like comes in, because that's both a bit scary and quite disorientating, and you don't want to make people feel sick, because it can have pretty intensive physical responses if you don't get it right. Having done QA in a VR headset for like 7 hours solid and having to like lie down afterward.
Oh my God, you poor thing.
Hot eyes. You don't think it'll happen, but then you get really hot eyes.
Oh, really? Your eyes just get set on fire?
Yeah, and you just, and every day is a bad hair day. It's all just been smushed down with the headset. But yeah, in terms of the platform as well, you have to be quite aware of that. When I was working on both Lola and the Giant and Arcus Path VR, they had mobile headsets as one of the platforms. And on mobile, you've got to be really, really clever because you're rendering everything twice. So, because obviously both eyes. I kind of intentionally, I'm a firm believer in working with your limitations and using them as a springboard for creativity. So, for example, on Arcus Path, it was a kind of game set within a headset, so you're already playing with this meta technology narrative. And we were also playing around with glitch aesthetics as well. So a kind of clever way of avoiding having tons and tons of process draining assets on screen is to have them generate around you through using LODs, level of distance models, so that they would appear around you on purpose rather than things popping in the distance by accident because you didn't have enough processing power.
It's like, whoa, hi.
Yeah. So we ended up developing a tool so that you'd have these LODs of these models. So it made it look like the plants, for example, around you would unfold in this kind of almost paper-like way. So that there's a lot of kind of ways that you can develop an art style just in general, not even necessarily with VR, but where you acknowledge the challenges of your medium and use them as ways to make visually interesting final products.
That's really so fascinating because like that's the thing. I mean, you kind of see it with certain games, like when people break the games, and then you can kind of like see like the God sort of mode of the games. I always love it when you can see how environments were created and how like sometimes they're left like unfinished because like they just couldn't find maybe another way to do it. But like the amount of creativity that goes into making the game just look good, but you just can't actually do it like yourself without like not cheating, but like in a way like creatively solving. We'll say it's creatively solving.
No, absolutely.
It's like, so crazy.
Honestly, all video games when they are shipped like are made of wishes and prayers and clever like clever ways of solving problems. Like I'm reminded of, I think it was Half-Life 2 that used this way, like this method of solving the issue with the train, where I think they were having difficulty animating it along a point. I may be completely wrong in this, but I think what they ended up doing was like attaching a one of the like a character model with the train kind of on its head, and so somehow, maybe because it had collision in a certain way that meant that it would like carry the physics of the models. So I could be completely like,
but that would be amazing.
But basically, the end point of it was that it wouldn't be visible to the player in any way because that wasn't how the scene was set up. But underneath the train was just this tiny model of like a soldier or something, just kind of just running along.
Oh my God!
Is great. But it's entirely descriptive of how so many problems are solved. Like there are some really wonderful moments where you'll be like, okay, we need to figure out how to best solve this problem, and through that there's some really ingenious moments.
Oh, that's so hilarious. I love it so much. But so how do you feel as though this level of like diversification will help now that you're entering in more of a leadership role, with your most recent roles being art director at Carrot Animation and now Mediatonic as a principal artist?
Yeah, it's interesting how you end up kind of not feeling like you know anything, and then when it actually comes down to it, when you're asked a question, you kind of surprise yourself.
Yeah.
Like I am reminded, I don't know if this makes me sound deeply narcissistic, but I did a podcast I think about maybe a year ago, coming up to a year ago, and I was listening to it back very anxiously, hoping that I didn't say anything dumb. And I was like, I think I might know what I'm talking about sometime. Which is very alarming. It's very helpful. I think when you've got experience, for example, of rigging characters and of modeling them in general, you will know not to put too much chunky geometry, for example, on an elbow because it might not deform properly. Something that I learned completely from scratch when I was working in animation was about acting space, which is something that I really want to carry further into games, which is all about simplification, letting the characters breathe and have room to move rather than making incredibly complex scenes, because often it's not necessarily needed. And that's something that I really want to carry over in terms of knowledge. But yeah, it's incredibly useful because I suppose, having worked in TV, I can read a script. I'm able to talk about shots and the more kind of TV-based direction aspects of them, and making sure that things like link up, that kind of thing, as well as discussing the narrative. And then with the 3D experience, that helps as well. remember being in a lecture with a concept artist I really looked up to, and he was saying about how all of the character artists just hated. Actually, this was for Guild Wars 2. Like all of the concept artists discovered the chain link brush, and all of the character artists hated it because like it's very nice and very easy to be in Photoshop and just have a chain link brush that makes a perfect chain, like just hanging off the hip of one of the characters, or maybe you have 15 chains hanging off the hips of some characters, but modeling that and having that animate correctly in an MMO
nightmare
isn't really, exactly. And having that experience in VR, where you've got to be really mindful of technical restraints, that's helpful as well. So yeah, it's funny because I wouldn't say that my path in games has been particularly clear. Like I've done a whole bunch of stuff, but I wouldn't change it because I think it's given me a really broad spectrum of experience.
I think that is so important because like especially now as games are becoming like especially just like AAA games are becoming so much more theatrical, it is important to have people who know how to build a scene like completely. Like I'm almost wondering if how we teach how to make games or the different parts of making games can meld together with like almost with like the theater because I do think, as you say, there's so much that you can learn from both. Like you can learn so much from both sides. I mean, theater's been around obviously for ages. So creating like captivating moments is obviously something that theater's been doing for years and years and years. So learning from that is like, that is kind of like you don't think of it as like a nothing thing, but it is like that nothing thing. And even with like costume design as well, like I know one of my friends learned a lot from making her own cosplay. She could draw a lot better. She could draw fabric a lot better because she knew how it's supposed to lay. Like there's so many things that you don't think of as being transferable, but you can transfer so many skills from different areas where, yeah, your career doesn't have to be a straight line. And if anything, it's better that it's not.
Honestly, one thing that I would love to see is more set designers working in level design and game design, or like environment art. I've been to some like one person plays where the set design is ingenious because it has to be cheap and it has to be evocative and it has to be used in a whole bunch of ways. And I'm like, that's environment art. That's just game development. Like having that resourcefulness is so helpful.
Lighting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like being able to compose an impactful scene is so important, and cinematography is definitely coming to the forefront in games like Control or in Death Stranding, where there's this very clear idea of how certain shots should be set up to be the most impressive and impactful. And I absolutely want to see more of that. I'm fascinated by it, which is why I endlessly consume like video essays on YouTube about good cinematography and all that kind of thing, because it's something that I want to push and I want to see more of. And also, as you said, with fashion design, there is a bit of an issue in concept art and games as a whole, where we're just referencing more concept art. Like I'm guilty of it. Everyone I know is guilty of it. But looking at couture fashion is phenomenal. Like they've been going for a lot longer than games have, and there is such a wealth of experimentation and fascinating resources and creativity there that we can draw upon.
Yeah, there's well more than anything that's out there at the moment. Like it's insane. I mean, You know, I haven't seen a good mankini in a freaking game yet. Like, I need to see
No.
this. I need this now.
One day. One day.
One day.
Yeah.
And one of the things you also champion on top of all this with your brilliant artistry is mental health. It's something that you feel very passionate about. And you've even worked in a game called A Part of Me that offers a guide for people who are going through their darkest moments in their life, particularly grief and death of a loved one. How important do you feel art is in those games to help convey the right message?
I think it's fundamental. I really value making art that makes people feel at home or safe. One of the things that I get told the most often about my paintings is that people want to live there, or they want to just be in that space, and that's really important to me, especially in stressful times. Games are a phenomenal respite from those difficult experiences. And I think that finding places and building places where people can feel at home and safe are just necessary. And like working on A Part of Me was amazing because I've really wanted to make tangible things that made people feel better. Like there was a very nice moment that I heard about when Arca's Path got demoed. I think it was at Eurogamer, and there was this little girl that I think she was on the spectrum, and she was finding everything very, very challenging, and she was getting really overwhelmed being there. But her parents realized that when she put on the headset for Arca's Path, it's very soothing. Like the first few levels are like all pink and really chill, and it's this very meditative gameplay of just moving your head. You don't use a controller, you just move your head to guide this ball around this very kind of lush world, and she would come to it to calm her down and kind of ground herself, which was just really really, really important and wonderful to know about. Like just that really did mean a lot to me. But yeah, I just, if possible, being able to work on things that offer safe harbor for people is something that I value a lot.
And like, I mean, it's so prevalent now with Animal Crossing in particular. Like so many people have found such solace in building a small little island and building up their characters and selling turnips. Like it's such an important thing.
It's definitely of the moment. It's it's my entire Twitter feed.
Yeah, it pretty much is.
I did a talk recently-ish, at an event that I never really expected to speak at. It was an NHS conference called PsychTech.
Oh wow.
And it was I wasn't anticipating it, but I really enjoyed it because it was all about gentle games and games that offered friendliness and, as he said, that kind of solace and a space away from difficult moments. And things like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, where you get to cultivate a space that is yours, where you get to have agency over it, particularly in times where you feel powerless, is fundamentally important. Having that sense of agency and even like some aspect of control over something is soothing and comforting.
Yeah, we really need it. Are there any other games that you'd recommend that might help people struggling with their mental health?
I suppose you never want to provide a treatment. Like ultimately, you want to reach out if things are really bad in terms of your mental health. I absolutely seek treatment, and talking therapy is one that I'm currently doing at the moment. It's great. I love it. But if it's something where you just need for example, some connection. I adore Journey. It's a perfect experience. It only probably lasts about 2 hours, like 3 hours at a push. But playing it with the online connectivity on is amazing, because I've had some of the most meaningful games experiences on there, because you can't communicate with the other player that you get matched up with, except with this really cute little pip sound. And you'll just make the entire goal is to get to the mountain, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning, and you end up feeling very naturally incredibly bonded to the person you get matched up with. Like, obviously sometimes you don't always match up with someone that's very kind of interested in waiting up for you.
They just want to get through the game. God damn it.
Exactly. But my first play through it, I was very lucky that I had a really meaningful buddy. I've sat people down and made them play it, and they've also had really like meaningful experiences. So that's an amazing one. I was playing Celeste as well, and that one really kind of tackles, it's a platformer where you once again get to the top of a mountain.
Always mountains.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty punishing platformer, to be honest, but it's quite addictive. But a recurring theme is Madeline, the main character's anxiety and depression, how she feels like she can't get things right, and there's very little manifestations of the negative things that she says to herself and the abusive things that she says to herself. And how she works through that, and how she comes to accept that, and it's a very, very powerful game.
And it's great that it's a female character as well going through these things. Like, it's so rare that we have just this sort of vulnerable main character who's realistic but also powerful, and just going through that journey. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. She's very you can empathize with her. Very, very, particularly me, because she's also stubborn, and I'm like, I see that.
I have it too. I'm a Taurus, so like stubborn is my middle name.
Happy birthday, Taurus season.
Yay, Taurus season. But
I'm a Scorpio, so I'm snarky. No one likes me.
No. I like Scorpios. I like everybody.
Thank you.
I don't have any biases against them, because I know that I'm tough, so I'm tough to deal with. So I'm just like, I just love everybody. It's fine. It
was so funny in Brighton, and me and one of my best friends, we were manning the stall together. And this guy came up to us, and he was just like, peruse some of the art. And he was like, what are your signs then? And I was like, I'm a Scorpio. And my friend was like, I'm an Aries. And he was like, I'm not going to mess with either of you.
Bye.
This is a very intense stall.
It's cool. But thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with me. It's been amazing.
It's been great. Thank you.
Ending on that note of signs.
Channel big Taurus energy, and live your truth. Stick strong to who you are. Don't let people push you around.
Exactly. That's all you need. That's all you need.
Yeah,
and 100%. Scorpios as well. Don't hate Scorpios.
Yeah. No, don't hate Scorpios. I'm a Leo moon, so it kind of makes sense. I'm loud, so
Don't hate any signs.
No.
That's it for this episode of She Plays Games. Be sure to follow Anna on Twitter at Anna Hollinrake. Also, if you want more episodes of She Plays Games, please be sure to subscribe and follow me on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube by searching She Plays Games, and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at She Plays Podcast. If you want to be on the show or want to nominate someone to come on the show, you can email me at sheplayspodcast@gmail.com. See you all next time on She Plays Games.